your knowledge. This is something which I wanted to know from a long time, and I'm sure many people are also waiting to learn a lot about this topic. So I'm very excited that you're here to share all your insights on this one. So thank you very much for presenting on this topic today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for an introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity. I was in Phoenix not too long ago. I first thought it was a coincidence I was getting invited, that someone caught me there, but apparently it was a happy coincidence. So hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to How to Prevent Marketing Fatigue and Drive Engagement. My name is Anthony. I am the CEO and co-founder of Deselect. We're a Salesforce ISV, that means independent software vendor. So we're on AppExchange, purpose-built for Marketing Cloud. In a past life, I was a Marketing Cloud consultant. I did implementations, large and small, not just for Marketing Cloud, but also for other platforms. So it's always a happy occasion for me to be able to sit in front of an audience such as yourselves today. So on today's agenda, we'll first start with covering the marketing fatigue challenge. What does it mean? Why is it important? And why do we see more and more of it in today's marketing efforts? I'll also take a quick stop looking at existing solutions. That will include what we have, for instance, with Salesforce Einstein, and what are the native capabilities that Marketing Cloud has? Where are they great? Where might they sometimes fall short? Then we'll go into Deselect Engage. So we'll explain you our potential solution to that challenge, and I will also show you a demo. Now, I foresee a Q&A section at the end. That said, I welcome questions throughout the presentation, if that's okay with Yotsna. And so you can put them in the chat, or I don't think it's an issue if people want to speak up. Our audience is not that large. I mean, it's not too large to avoid that. So I think we'll be fine. All right. I don't know, Yotsna, if you have a preference on that.
Yes, so we will open it up to the questions at the end, or if you see any questions that are that have context to what you are discussing at that point of time, feel free to answer that at that time, or if you prefer to have it at the end of the session also, we're good with that. And if anybody wants to talk and add more details, they're welcome to. So they can directly put the question forth.
All right, fantastic. Appreciate it. And by the way, I forgot to mention that aside from being a Salesforce marketing champion myself, I also run the SFMC user group in Austin, Texas, which is where I'm based currently, even though I'm from Belgium originally, in case you were wondering about the accent. So for those who are maybe curious to follow our virtual sessions or maybe on-site sessions in the future, feel free to check out the page for that group and sign up. Okay, now there's one little side thing I want to do here. I like to start many of my presentations with this because I like to present instant value to listeners. And aside from Engage, I just want to highlight Deselect Search. Deselect Search is a free solution to basically find anything in Marketing Cloud. So if you ever find yourself scratching your head because you couldn't find that DE, that piece of content, that contact, check out Deselect Search. It is totally free. It is available for both Google Chrome and for the AppExchange as well. In case you're working at a company that doesn't allow Google Chrome extensions, that can happen. Then you might want to look at our AppExchange version.
I want to quickly interrupt here, Anthony. I want to really appreciate you for this tool, because this has been helpful for not just me, for many people. So we all have gone through the challenge of figuring out the data extension, especially if the instance has a lot of data extensions and so many automations, these things are set up. This has been a savior, I should say. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. Thank you for that. Great. So we'll jump into the challenge of saturation control. There are two key issues why people are looking more and more at saturation control today. The first one is the most self-evident one, that is to avoid oversaturation. That is to say, making sure you don't spam customers too much, but maybe you're even in an industry such as financial services or pharmaceuticals, where you wouldn't even send a lot of communications. So it's not so much an issue of spamming your customers too much, but maybe you have to comply with policies, whether they're imposed by the company or even legally. So essentially limiting the amount of communications that marketing teams or multiple teams can send. The other one is that maybe you're under engaging some of your contacts, and so you want to increase your overall frequency, but of course without impacting engagement. That is to say, you want to be able to drive up communication, but not see more unsubscribes, or make sure people are actually still opening and clicking emails. To look at it even from a wider angle, like why do these issues arise? And there's sort of three key ones. First one, multiple stakeholders. Many of our customers have multiple marketing teams, or companies that serve multiple products, multiple services, multiple markets. In these cases, the risk of over communicating towards certain companies or customers, in fact, becomes real, and that risk increases as it's harder and harder to align the communication amongst channels, amongst teams. But secondly, channels, omni-channel, or in some companies just called multi-channel. It is something that many companies strive for, to have that good view across all communication channels to contacts. But it's sometimes very hard. And so having a saturation control solution in place that can handle the multiple channels that today's companies use, be it from email to WhatsApp to whatever, that is really important. And lastly, there's not really a standard solution available. That is to say, every company really has its own unique sets of rules, and that might be driven by industry, as I mentioned before, but it really might also be company specific. So I want to talk you in the next couple of slides, talk you through what that challenge looks like practically, so we can better understand real case scenarios. Say, for instance, that you want to limit the amount of emails sent to customers to 3 each 15 days. So essentially, within a time span of 15 days, you would like to send no more than 3 emails. So that might look something like this in the visual, and you can see today's date is here. And in the last 7.5 days, I suppose, we already sent 2 communications, but there are 2 more we want to do in the future. So that means that the specific user has consumed 2 of those slots. 1 is still available out of those 2 slots in the future. Now, the most common approach to saturation control, it's also the easiest approach, would basically to send a priority based on the send date. That is to say, that first communication here, the first yellow ball you can see on the slide, that's the communication we're going to do. Easy. That's also what Einstein would do, by the way. It just looks at communications and sends as I come in and as I get filtered, and determines if something has to be sent, yes or no. And if that first send still gets, if it still happens, then obviously that second one would be over our limit of 15 communications. 3 communications per 15 days, my apologies. Now, that's sort of the basic premise, but now we're going to dig a little bit deeper where this challenge becomes more complex. So for instance, let's say if on the day when we want to do that third communication, there are actually multiple communications that we might want to send to a given contact. In that case, we actually need to prioritize. So you can see even within a simple saturation control challenge, you also need to add a prioritization mechanism, not just based on time, because sometimes you may have multiple communications on the same day, and you need to be able to determine what is the most important communication. Another one. So earlier I explained that most saturation control solutions, they would just prioritize the first send. But let's say if some CEO or some director comes barging in and says, well, we need this other communication absolutely needs to happen. So you can see here you also need to prioritize, but it's a little bit different than the other one. It's not just that this is a communication in the future that needs to happen, but so we need to know that, and we need to be able to cancel out the third communication that was already scheduled here. So it's not just a matter of first come, first serve, or even when things happen at the same time, they need to be prioritized. We actually need to be able to prioritize into the future as well. Now, where it gets really complex is knowing which contact is in which campaign, because so far I've been talking as if there's only one set of newsletter subscribers, and for some companies it might be the case, but in the vast majority of cases, the reality is more complex. There's a few examples here of campaigns we might be doing. For instance, people who bought shoes last month, some A/B tests for people living in Arizona, a campaign for our e-commerce customers. but there may be some complete partial overlap between all these lists. The truth is we're not really managing campaigns when we're thinking about saturation control. So we're not managing the users, we're not managing the recipients, we are managing campaigns, and we're used to doing that. But the saturation itself is at the level of our recipients. And that makes it very complex because it's not really transparent to us which recipients have already been involved in which campaigns. I'm mentioning that because I know some companies, they try to sort of manually solve for this problem, and they have a calendar. They have a marketing calendar, and they keep track of which segments, which lists are being sent on which day, and they have a weekly alignment meeting, and they stick their heads together with their marketing team and try to prioritize based on that. But it gets extremely complex very fast, and sometimes it's just too complex to really be able to manage. And it gets worse because so far I've only been describing one simple rule, that is 3 emails every 15 days. But in reality, you would have way more advanced rules. You may have rules, for instance, if there's a different type of communication, for instance, not a newsletter, but a promo, not a promo, but a company update, etc. And maybe you may have different rules for different types of contacts. Maybe you have different rules for leads versus customers, etc. So let's take a quick look at existing solutions. I already mentioned Einstein engagement frequency. Einstein is, I would call it, more of a brand than an actual product. That's where sometimes people get a bit confused. There is no such thing as the Einstein product. And I think many people in this call already realize that Einstein is actually a conglomeration of different solutions. Some of them newer, some of them have been with Marketing Cloud or other parts of Salesforce's offering for many years. So when we talk about Einstein, we have to be really specific and say, okay, what exact feature, what exact Salesforce product are we talking about? In this case, I'm talking about Einstein engagement frequency, which is essentially a probabilistic model. It predicts the state of a customer, and that state could be saturated, on target, or undersaturated. And then you can create dedicated paths for these people based on a journey. So practically, it looks like what you can see on this picture. Someone would make a simple journey, add a frequency split for saturation control, and then you have 2 outcomes. Either the person is saturated according to Einstein, and then you may choose to not send an email, or okay, that person is not saturated yet, we can still send an email. That's in a nutshell how that works. Now, here's the thing. I mentioned it's a probabilistic model, and the data that Einstein is essentially using comes from data views such as _send, _open, _unsubscribe. If you're not familiar with the phrase data views yet, and you're serious about building your knowledge in Marketing Cloud, I would highly recommend you look into this. But in a nutshell, they're essentially system-generated data extensions in a way by Marketing Cloud, and they automatically capture all your send, open, and subscribe information. And they can be used, they can be queried through SQL, or one of our products, Deselect Segment, allows you to enter those as well, access those as well. Now, here's the thing. So Einstein is based on this, but the problem is if you don't use SMC's subscription center, all of your contacts will be undersaturated or on target. And that has to do with that _unsubscribe data view. Here's the thing. I have not met any customer so far who has used the purely out-of-the-box subscription center by Salesforce. They may be using some of these data views, but most customers build their custom unsubscription center. So only for that reason, Einstein becomes not workable for many customers. Now, there are other things. Einstein is only available for email and push channels, so not for text, for instance, not for WhatsApp. Number 3, it needs some time to be usable. So you need at least 90 days of data. So for customers who are just starting out, they can't use it yet. And then 4th, and I think this is really the biggest one, it's a black box. We don't really know the secret sauce. If Einstein tells you this person is saturated or not, you don't really know why. And some people might be very comfortable with AI, and a lot of interesting things are obviously happening in the industry. But for many marketers, this is not enough, especially if they want to set their own rules, say, based on policies, based on even sometimes legal requirements. They can't do that. So that's just not a good fix for them. And keep in mind, there's some other practical things. I already mentioned them, and I'll cover them just very quickly for that reason. Einstein is still using the first come, first serve principle. But what happens if you have multiple communications at the same moment, or there's an unplanned communication that one of your leadership team is pushing the team to send out, and you're not clear on people in different campaigns, and you don't even know if the person was really saturated or not because of that black box that I described, and so on. Then you also have rule discrepancies. So these are some of the more really day-to-day practical concern that marketing teams have that we've been talking with, that they found where this fell short. Sometimes we've seen, in some rare cases, customers come up with their own custom solutions. I'll just cover this really quickly. It's always, especially for a customer themselves, if they have to build something custom, that's hard. Only the largest companies can really do that. And either you end up with something that's maybe more cheap, but has very basic rules and very basic interface, or you end up with something that's rather expensive and complex. There are ways to do this. You could come up with creative solutions in SQL. You could come up with some way, even in cloud pages, to create some kind of UI for your marketing team. But it's extremely tricky and very complex. So we haven't seen a lot of companies who are really successful with that. And that's why we said, well, many of our customers are struggling with this. Can we do something about that? And that's how the idea of Deselect Engage was born. It's a brand new capability on our platform. It was launched last month. We already have 5 paying customers, and we're seeing a lot of interest arriving. So partially because of which I think we're also here today. But what is Engage? So Engage is a brand new platform to help marketing teams solve saturation control, but also prioritize communication and also optimize campaigns across team. So it's a little bit more than just saturation control, as you can already tell. And you'll see in a moment that actually there's a whole campaign planning aspect to it, which is really interesting. There are 2 primary use cases. You want to customize your saturation control solution based on rules, or you want to prioritize, you want to have some kind of prioritization solution based on the campaigns you're doing. I'll show you those rules. I'll show you the prioritization. Also, we support every channel. So every channel that Marketing Cloud supports, we support already. And there's actually even ways to integrate third-party channels. So, for customers, it would even be possible to say integrate their call center to Deselect Engage if you want to make it part of your engagement control. Obviously, most customers, however, they will resort to email and maybe text, maybe push, maybe WhatsApp in Marketing Cloud. Lastly, it's turnkey. It's like our whole platform. It's available from day one. Customers who sign up with us, they can start using Deselect right away, essentially. And there's no need to wait for data or any integration work whatsoever. How Engage helps marketers is that it's a single source of truth. It avoids unsubscribes, opt-outs, so essentially avoids marketing fatigue, and it creates a better experience too for our customers, for marketers, because it's a lot less stressful than building these kind of plannings yourself. Okay, I'm going to skip over this. Instead, I'm going to jump to the demo. I'll just pause real quick, see if there were any questions so far. I know we covered a lot of ground on what saturation control is, why you should care.
Thanks for the details so far, Anthony. I don't see any questions as of now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then we'll jump into the demo. And for this demo, I'm going to take you to Deselect and Engage, which, as you can tell, is nested straight inside Marketing Cloud. Our whole offering is fully integrated with Marketing Cloud, and once it's installed in your environment, you would see Deselect Engage. By the way, you might also notice, for instance, Deselect search is popping up here, and in case you're wondering how I get this nice search bar, you guessed it, that is Deselect search available for Chrome. Now, in this case, I went to Deselect Engage, and then interestingly enough, that brings us to this screen, and as you can tell, that's a calendar. Remember how I said that it's not just defining rules, the practical application of situation control is a calendar, so your team can plan. Now, in this calendar, you can see there's a number of scents that have been planned. I prefer to use the word scent because these scents could be part of a journey builder scent. It's not necessarily a campaign. But you can see they also have color codes. The legend at the top explains what these color codes are. As you can read, depending on how many saturated contacts are in certain campaigns, they get a different code. So let's, for instance, take a look at this yellow campaign right here, general promo. When I click on this, you can see here we can configure a scent. It's called general promotion. It's linked to a certain data extension. And so from here, you can already kind of guess that Engage is able to see, okay, all these contacts in this data extension, these 251 records, these we need to track to see if they're saturated or not. Then there's some additional information, but actually I'm going to take you to the preview of the scent. And here we can see that out of a total of, maybe I'll need to zoom in a little bit. There we go. Out of a total of 251 contacts, 170 were included. So those people would receive the communication, but 81 people have been filtered out. And that's because Engage, based on a series of rules, has determined that these people are oversaturated. So that's Engage at work. And now in this overall planning, you get a sense of which campaigns are good to go and which of them may have issues. For instance, this May promo is fully red, which means that it's heavily saturated and we may need to replan it. But how did Engage determine that? How, against which rules did we evaluate those contacts? Well, for that purpose, I'm going to take you, to answer that question, I'm going to take you here to our admin panel. And this is really I think the fun part for consultants or admins alike to sit together with their marketing teams and brainstorm on the strategy, on the communication strategy that you want to implement and how it's going to pan out. I can skip over users, but for us, it starts with campaign types. Now, this is optional in your setup, but if you want to have a distinction for your rules between different campaigns, say, your newsletter campaigns follow different rules and say surveys, which in turn follow different rules from promotional campaigns, you can do that. So these campaign types can just quite easily, be added. Example, campaign type, and add, and that will add it. And that itself will not do anything just yet because we haven't linked rules to it, but it's a first step in the setup. That's number one. Secondly, another optional one is contact categories. So in this case, so the use case for this is that maybe you have different groups of people, populations, segments, whatever you want to call them, of people that you engage with. A very easy example, maybe you have B2B and B2C customers and you follow different rules. Another example is maybe you're active in different markets. For instance, in Germany, people are super sensitive to data privacy. Same in some Scandinavian countries, whereas in other nations, that's less of a concern. And so you might have lighter rules there. But whatever it is, you can determine what those contact categories are to you. And to do that, I have selected a data extension that I have. All contacts in this case, we've identified the contact key, which is our unique identifier, of course. And now we can also select a field that contains a contact category. So essentially, if in your data model, you would have a column where you can identify leads versus customers, or B2B versus B2C, or country, or whatever it is, you can indicate that field from that data extension. And then in this little graph here below, that is just deselect engage that has scraped those contacts and is showing you how many of each there are, just as a sanity check. If that looks okay, then we can click add categories, which I've already done. And you can see that below now we have multiple contact categories. And these, together with the campaign types, which we set in the last step, we can build rules on. Lastly, the last ingredient is channels. So email, SMS, push, they're already here. I've activated all of them for demo purposes. And if you like, you can add custom channels as well for those who want to go a step further and even think about WhatsApp or call center integration. And then we get to the fun part, which is setting rules. So here you can see, if I go to rules, there's a number of them listed already. And let's just play around with one of these. Let's say the survey limitation, if you want to change that. So this is the interface to apply a rule. You can see the rule is currently active, could deactivate it, activate it, the name of that rule. And in this case, we're applying it to all contacts, but maybe you want to treat different contact categories differently. And you could say, well, this rule actually only want to apply them to customers. And then you could say, well, I want to actually allow 3 surveys every 14 days. And you could even go further. You could even make distinctions between channels. So again, the 3 ingredients that we provide to build your rules around are campaign types, contact categories, and channels. Now, once that is active and these rules are applied, all of that stuff is used in the calendar to determine how saturated certain contacts already are. But how is it practically used in Marketing Cloud? How do you filter out people? Well, we took inspiration from Einstein, and going to Journey Builder, we've essentially established a new component that you can use in your journeys. So let's see if I can find a good example. I'll take a simpler one. There we go. So here, for instance, you can see that we have a data extension that's feeding new contacts into this flow. And then we have our deselect engage component. Now, this engage component itself is linked to a certain send we have defined in that calendar before. And because of that, this engage component is adhering to very specific rules for leads or for contact categories or for campaign types or whatnot. And then as people flow through that component, every time a contact goes through it, basically Engage will do a calculation and say, this contact is saturated, this contact is not saturated, right? And then based on that, it can go to the next step. Now, what we would, I'll add a new version to spice it up a little bit. What we would then do is we could add extra communications. So say that a certain person is included, then we would send still a communication to that person. If the contact was oversaturated, we'll exclude them. And we might choose to not send a communication, or maybe wait to send a communication. Because if you wanted to, you could also reevaluate people multiple times. Again, if there are questions about any of this, or if you're wondering about different use cases, by all means, shoot. But that in a nutshell is how the engage component is applied in Journey Builder. And we can make it a little bit more complex if I go back to our overall journeys. So for instance, this journey is a little bit set up a little bit more complex. You can see data comes in, goes into engage. People who are oversaturated, they don't get more communication. People who are fine, they get an email. But then later we rejoin both streams, it comes back together, and we do another engage evaluation. So there's no real limit to how many you want to add like these within a journey. And every time you can evaluate the people against your rules. There's a great question in the chat. Adam is asking, does deselect engage work across multiple child BUs in SFMC? And so Adam, the answer is yes, we can set that up for our customers. And it's a great question. It is something that for some customers, they want it and some customers don't want that. So some customers, they will want their saturation controls within a BU, and it might have its completely separate data. Say, for instance, if you're marketing into Europe, in France, your contacts may simply be different than the ones in Germany, for instance. Kimberly is asking, can you tell a little bit more about what makes this app better than Einstein engagement frequency? So Kimberly, I wouldn't necessarily say one is better than the other, but they work very differently. If I just go back to, let's see, this slide, and I'm happy to share the slides afterwards with Yotsna, and then we can maybe distribute them to the group. But there are severe limitations to Einstein frequency capping. And I think the two main ones are, most people don't use a subscription center anyway. And if you don't, you can't use Einstein. Also, Einstein it's a black box. It's AI driven, machine learning driven, which in itself I don't have anything against that. But for the purpose of saturation control, marketers typically want to set rules themselves and understand why people were filtered out or why not. And that's not possible with Einstein engagement frequency. Then let's see, Perna is asking, this model, how it's calculating saturation, deselect engage, is there any calculation going on the back end? So yes, that is exactly what's happening, Perna. On our, we are calculating based on the rules that customers have configured to see if a, let's say, you know, a contact enters one of these, right? At that point, what's happening is that Marketing Cloud checks with deselect engage, and deselect engage will look, okay, for this specific contact, in how many communications were they involved in the past, and what rules apply to this person. For instance, is this person a lead? Okay, I have a contact category lead, and there are 5 rules linked to that. And then what channel is this communication? Oh, it's email, so I'm going to apply these rules. Now, you may have many rules. Even in my example, let's go back here. You can see I have 5 rules, and that can already be a little complex, but some customers may have dozens. We take the most strict rule and apply that. So that's how that works. As to your second question, Perna, how can we check which users are saturated or some records are not calculated? I think the last part of my demo will answer that. So the next thing I wanted to show you and then I'll address your question too as well, Perna, is that now that you have seen how I've set up rules and how they are applied in Journey Builder, you also kind of start to understand how these colors are shown. It's basically based on how many people are saturated. Now you can see I had a May promo that was supposed to go out today, but it's all red, right? If I go to the preview of the sent, all these contacts will be excluded. So that's kind of a waste of effort. So instead, what we can do is we can now move this campaign or this send rather to next week, Wednesday. And as I did that, you may have noticed that at the top, there's been this pop-up appeared that says recalculation required. So let's just do that and see once the calculation has happened, if that changes something. And that can take a little while. You can see this little cogwheel here in the top right. I don't know if you can see it. That's spinning around, and we'll revisit that later once the calculation is ready. So far, I've been on the calendar view. There's also a list view of our campaigns because, oh wait, our recalculation has happened. There we go. May promo turned green. Yay. All these contacts will get emails now. That's great. Going back to the list view. So this is just a different view from that calendar view. It's exactly the same sense, but some customers find this really useful because they may have different priorities set up. I haven't talked too much about that today, but for every send that you configure, you can even define priorities, because maybe your rule allows for 3 newsletters a week, but what if 4 newsletters have been configured and one of the 4 is still less important than the others? You can do that actually. If I go back here to my calendar view, let's click on this general promo, and you can see there is at the bottom in the configuration, there is send priority applied. In this case, priority number 2 has been applied. So let's say another dimension we can add on top of campaign types, contact categories, and channel. Also from here, we can see which sends are excluded. So here, look at that. Our CEO wants to send a communication, and what do you know? He wants none of the rules to be applied, an exception to be made. So we can do that. And then to answer Prerna's question, in this view, we can see campaigns in the past that were sent, how many contacts were included, and how many were suppressed. And if let's take this one, for instance. If I click through on it, we can start to look at the level of individual contacts in case you want to investigate. This screen typically takes a little bit longer to load because essentially we're doing hundreds of API calls to Marketing Cloud, and we need to wait for Marketing Cloud to reply. But here we can see in this campaign, there was a little bit of a miss. Everyone was excluded. So we didn't really take into account our rules. You can see the reason for exclusion. In this case, a send had already happened. So if we want to drill down even further and say, okay, what happened with contact C113? We click down on that. Same story. We need to give Marketing Cloud a little moment. And maybe while I wait, I saw that T. Anderson asked another question. Does DSelect only work in Chrome, or do other browsers support it? So no, this is fully supported in any browser that you can use. Maybe that question comes because for search, we have a Chrome extension. So that only works on Chrome. But for search these days, by the way, we also have an App Exchange version. And just like DSelect Segment, just like Engage, all these products, they work on any browser. The only thing you need is Marketing Cloud. And meanwhile, my contact has also loaded, so you can see in which campaigns this person was involved. And there are even some future campaigns that are planned where this person is in fact included. So yeah, that was a very quick view. I think where it's really interesting is to look at specific use cases. If you think there's a real interest in your company, if this is a real problem for you, or maybe you're a consulting partner and this is a challenge many of your customers have, or you're even just interested to learn more about how you can work with us and how you can how you can do projects around this, because obviously some thinking needs to go into this and some best practice apply to set rules, then reach out. Easiest way to get into contact with us is via our website. If you want to have a bit of a better overview of our Engage product, you can go to dselect.com/engage, or you can also just directly book a demo through dselect.com/demo if you want to go a little bit deeper or explore your specific use cases. That's all I had from my end today. If there's no further questions from the audience, and I'm also happy just to hear feedback from the audience and hear what you guys thought.
That seems to be a great tool, Anthony. I'm so glad to have learned about this tool. This would be really helpful, and I can't wait to explore it.
Great, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And I'll make sure that we share the slides in case people want to browse through those as well.
Thank you. So we will be sharing the recording and on the YouTube channel Trailblazing Together. So on the video description, I will add the slides link and any other. And if you have any other resources you want to share, we can link everything in there.
That's fantastic. Okay. Well, then thanks again.
Do you want to put in your LinkedIn handle or any other way that people can reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Let's see if I can. Shall I provide it to you, or would you like me to drop it right now?
Drop it in the chat. I will also include that on the video description.
Okay, let me just quickly grab that in case people want to connect.
Or I can find it down. Okay, awesome. And I see one question, maybe the last question of the day. Does this tool take sense based on wait steps in Journey Builder into account and show them on the calendar?
Excuse me. The wait steps are not taken into account, if that's what you mean, Kimberly. But individual sends that happen in a single journey could be mapped to, on the one hand, Engage components that you saw me drop in the Journey Builder, and then you would on the calendar create multiple sends for those. That's how most customers would do that. Alternatively, what you can also do, if I don't know if that's really an answer to your question, but that's maybe also another interesting aspect. If you have journeys that are always on, that are just like constantly sending, they don't really have a send date, but you still want to filter them, we allow for people to plan unscheduled sends as well, so they can still be taken into consideration. Does that answer your question? Yes, yeah, great.
And any other questions, you can unmute. I think those are the questions. I don't see anything else. Well, thank you very much, Anthony. I'm so glad for this session.
Great.
Thanks
it was
for-
a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining. So we have the AmScript bootcamp running in parallel. Feel free to register to those sessions. If you haven't attended those sessions, those are all recorded and uploaded to the same YouTube channel. Thank you once again and hope to see you all again in the next session. Take care.
Thank you. Have
Bye-bye.
a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.